Good afternoon, BookTube. This is Johnny. Thought I'd make a video. It's been a couple of days. I said this is just going to be a short video. I was going to make a video, a longer one, maybe tonight. I'm sitting here. I said that again, didn't I? Today is January the 12th, 2018. It is a Friday. It is 4:13 in the afternoon here in West Michigan. And I've been sitting here, reading God's Glory and Salvation Through Judgment, a Biblical Theology by James M. Hamilton Jr. I got this in the mail a couple of days ago. So I've been reading it. So yeah, that's what I'm reading for this afternoon. And reading the Bible. Yeah, the last verses I read in the Bible, I read them here in this book, God's Glory and Salvation Through Judgment. And I was reading, he quoted from Revelations chapter 14, these verses, starting at verse 6. Then I saw another angel flying in the midst of heaven, having the everlasting gospel to preach to those who dwell on the earth, to every nation, tribe, tongue, and people, saying with a loud voice, fear God and give glory to him. So the angel was flying in the midst of heavens, having the everlasting gospel to preach to those who dwell on the earth, saying with a loud voice, fear God, give glory to him, for the hour of his judgment has come, and worship him who has made heavens and earth, the sea, and the springs of water. So I was really meditating upon that, saying with a loud voice, fear God, give glory to him, for the hour of his judgment has come, and worship him who made heaven and earth, the sea, and the springs of water. But I primarily I'm here to, I think it was last week or this week, somebody in BookTube, a BookTuber called Time for Books, sent me an email that they had tagged me. I don't usually do tags because I have not read a lot of fiction over the last 65 years of my life. I've read a lot, but I can't really get around some of those questions and tags, so I don't do tags. But she tagged me, and I looked at the questions, and I thought, hey, I'll do them. So it was a used books tag. So here are the questions. Tell us about your favorite secondhand book you own. Show it off if you can. Now that's a problem, because I've been collecting secondhand books or used books since I basically stopped working, which was around June 2007. So, and then I say it's only been really the last 4 or 5 years that I have really got into going to thrift stores. Now, I used to go to used book sales, here and there in the area. But I think I have really got into going to thrift stores, buying used books. Like, when I'm talking about thrift stores like Salvation Army and Goodwill, or Bibles from Mexico here in Holland, or Action House, places like that. Ditto's is another place. There's a thrift store, and there's other thrift stores here in Holland, Michigan. But I don't really have any favorites. I really don't. I have so many, thousands and thousands of used books, and I don't really have any favorites. I wrote here, I put this tag in my online diary, Crooked Fingers, and I wrote, I do not have any favorite secondhand book. I buy a lot of used books, and rarely do I come across one that becomes my favorite. I suppose I only have a few favorite books, like the collected works of St. John of the Cross. Yeah, I don't really have any really favorite books. I have a lot of books, but I don't know. I have very few favorites. Question 2, tell us where you like to shop for your secondhand books and why you love it there. Well, I just mentioned I have this obsession. Every week I have to at least go to the thrift stores around where we live, which are just in a couple minutes from where we live. I don't like to drive, especially in the wintertime. I'm always afraid of car wrecks or sliding on ice or somebody smashing into me and I become a cripple or something, wind up the rest of my life in a wheelchair. So, like I said, I wrote here, I buy my used books from Amazon, Salvation Army thrift store, Goodwill thrift store, the local library used bookstore, which I volunteered at today. This is a Friday. As you know, on Fridays, I volunteer at the library used bookstore, the Book Nook, from 10 in the morning to 1 in the afternoon. Used book sales. Now, I go to used book sales at least a couple times a year around where we live. And Action House thrift store. I do not love any of these places. I don't like that word love. I mentioned it before. I love God. I love the Lord Jesus Christ. I love the Holy Spirit. I love the saints. I love my wife. I love my children, my grandchildren. And I love my neighbors. At least I try to. I try to love humanity. I love animals and birds and trees and sky, but I don't really love any particular thrift store. Question 3, show us 3 recent thrift store books buys that you are excited about and explain why you love them. Well, like I said, I don't get excited. I rarely get excited about anything. And I don't have any love for, I don't have anything right now. So, like I said, I buy a lot of used books, but none of these books am I excited about. I don't know. I can't. Maybe, many years ago when I first got into Reformed Calvinistic literature, I used to get excited about finding a book. Because back in those days, I was really into systematic theology and the Puritans. I still am, but not like I was back in 1975 when I was really poor and I was really in just discovering Puritan literature, discovering theological literature, Reformed theology, and all these things. And then I would get excited about a book if I found it. I used to go to places that had used Christian books, and I would get excited about finding something, but that has been many years. Many years. So yeah. This is question, let me see, 1, 2, 3, 4. This is question 4. Show and tell us about, and show us, if possible, the worst used book that you ever bought. I do not buy books that I would not find worth reading or owning. I just don't buy books, used books. When I go to a used book sale or a used bookstore or a thrift store, I know what I'm looking for, and I just don't blindly just grab a book because it's 50 cents. I have spent many years in libraries and bookstores. I've read tons of books on books, writers, literature. I've gone to college, I've gone to seminary. I've just read a lot about books, and so I know the writers and I know what is worth reading and buying. And I just don't buy anything just because it's cheap. So I'm here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The 5th question, tips and advice. Please give some of your best advice and tips to book lovers who are new or unfamiliar with purchasing used books. My personal advice, as I write here on this sheet of paper, my personal advice about buying used books is educate yourself on what are the best books in the areas that you like to read in. For example, American history. What are the best books on American history? What are the best books on the Civil War, or the best books on the Vietnam War, or the best books on the 60s, or the best books on a certain person like Oscar Wilde or James Joyce, or what are the best poetry anthologies and things like that. Educate yourself. And then when you have that knowledge in your brain, you go to a thrift store or a used book sale, you know when you spot it if it's worth buying. So educate yourself. That's what I wrote here. There are a lot of used books not worth buying. There's a lot. That's why they're in thrift stores. People didn't want them. They threw them away. And they didn't prize them. So you find a lot of junk. You see a lot of books are just trash at thrift stores and even used book sales. I see a lot of junk at the Book Nook that I volunteer at the library bookstore, used bookstore. I mean, there's a lot of junk in there, a lot of crap. So you have to educate yourself on what are the good books, and read books by people who know about books. Literary critics or people who are readers. Maybe you have a friend or a teacher or a professor or a minister or an elder. Ask them, what are the best books? Now, I mentioned this book in the beginning, this God's Glory and Salvation Through Judgment. When I buy a book and get a book like this, what I do is I go in the back and I look at the bibliography. And I go through the bibliography. See, here's the bibliography. Here's the bibliography. And it lists all the books that he used in his research for this book. And I tell you, as I went through this bibliography, I have at least 50% of the books that he listed here. And I've done that for years. When I was working, there are academic Christian bookstores in Grand Rapids near where I live. There's Zonderman's, there was Kragel's, there was Baker, there's Erdman's. Now there's just Baker Bookhouse. But back in the old days, I would have a list of the best commentaries on Genesis, or the best biblical theology books, or the best books on the Gospel of John. And I had the best books on Paul and the Law, or best books on systematic theology, or New Testament theology, or missions, or church history, or biblical interpretation. And I would find out what those books were, and then I would go to Erdman's or Baker or some academic Christian bookstore and look for them and buy them. And that's the same thing. There are scholars out there, literary scholars, historians, literary critics. What do they recommend? And I would educate myself. Read bibliographies. Look at the footnotes. I always read footnotes, and then I would, if I see a book I don't know about, or a book that looks interesting, I go to the computer and I look at it on Amazon, or I go to see if it's a current book. I would order it from Erdman's or Baker Bookhouse or some other Christian sells Christian books. It's the same thing. There are all kinds of ways that we can find those books that are the best books. So that's the tag. I'm not going to tag anybody. I'm just doing this tag because I don't want to be impolite or rude. And I do being appreciated. I do appreciate being thought about. But like I said, I don't do tags. I'm not into buddy reads. I'm not into a lot of the book tube kind of things, because I'm, like I said, my videos, my booktube channel is, this is the life of a Christian bookworm, and that's what I am. So like I said, I have a lot of used books that I have added to our library. I wanted to show those. And like I said, this afternoon I'm reading this new book I got in the mail, God's Glory and Salvation Through Judgment, A Biblical Theology by James M. Hamilton Jr. I have his book, God's Indwelling Presence, in our library. I was going to show that. I'll show that maybe later. So anyway, I'll sign off. Thank you for watching this video. Hoping you're having you have a good weekend. Maybe this is Friday Reads. I don't know. So yeah. So I'll sign off until next time. Bye.